from the New York Giants training facility, Quest Diagnostics Training Center in East Rutherford, New Jersey. A few hours after Joe Schoen's press conference, just got finished writing for the New York Daily News. And now I am joining you, diehard Giants fans, NFL fans, to talk about what I saw, what I heard, what developed here as the Giants slipped to 2-11, losing their seventh straight, and as the Giants general manager did his best to make an argument for his job. Joe Schoen believes that he is the man to lead the Giants into the future despite a 3-22 record in the Giants' last 25 games and a 5-25 record in the Giants' last 30 games. Obviously, a difficult sell, and the Giants GM was as prepared as he could be to make his strongest case for himself to go into year five, which would be the final year of his current contract. But there was only so much Joe Schoen was able to say before we got into the real true difficult questions of the presser that he had to face. And where it is the Giants have results on one side and they have the reality that Joe Schoen is trying to serve and sell on another. And frankly, the idea is in a vacuum, and if you're able to sit up in your ivory tower as a member of the Giants front office or ownership, you could have a conversation perhaps about, as Joe Schoen said, the flashing of a Theo Johnson or the production of a Brian Burns. But as a whole, what Shane did today, in my opinion, was he was trying to make a case for the roster being sufficient and the solid foundation being in place, but arguing simultaneously that it was separate from the disastrous results on the field. You cannot, though, make that argument genuinely and in good conscience when in one breath you're saying we have good pieces here, and in another breath you're saying we got blown out in all three phases of the game in New England on Monday night. This is a worst case scenario for Joe in a lot of ways, coming off of a standalone nationally televised game where the Giants turned in a no-show first half performance. And, really, the game was over. The game was over once the Giants essentially laid down and weren't prepared to play in New England, and Gillette Stadium was up there. Obviously, a lot of you were with me on Talkin Ball post-game live from the Gillette Stadium press box, running on 3 hours sleep right now, as many of us were driving down south from the stadium in Foxborough and, um, jumping into the Giants building, into the media room, being here for about a half an hour, walking into the Giants locker room, having some conversations with players, and then eventually going in, waiting for a while, talking a little bit to Mike Kafka, and then eventually to Joe Schoen. Interestingly enough, Shane was almost 40 minutes late to his press conference today. Obviously, you know, an interesting development given the fact that Abdul Carter, his number three overall pick, now has missed a meeting and been late a second time. And I saw Dan Duggan, my colleague, had reported it was related to the it was related to missing a special teams meeting and some confusion about whether he was still on the punt team or not. But regardless, Abdul was not able to do his professional duties as a member of the Giants, as the person who's making millions of dollars, right? You can't stand up and defend that. But back to Joe Shane, back to the press conference, and back to today. I want to start by saying thank you to all of the Giants fans, Giants content creators, and diehards and diehard ballers, as we call our diehard followers here at Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard. Thank you to all of you for holding me accountable and for holding us accountable in the media. Because, I talk a big talk when it comes to holding Joe Shane accountable and holding whether it's the NFL, whether it's the NFL Players Association, it might be a player one day, it might be a coach the next. But, the old idea of speaking truth to power, getting to the bottom of the truth, of course, in the context of us covering a sports team and a professional sports team, it's about performance, it's about results at the end of the day, and it's a booming billion-dollar entertainment business. And so there's entertainment to it as well. But by and large, I'm very serious about trying to do the journalistic part of the job and get to the root of the reality of the truth, and also to bring what I feel is relevant and informative and true to you guys, the fans, the diehards out there. And so I'm grateful to all the ballers and everybody out there who put in suggested questions into my comments on X and on Instagram. To those of you who tweeted things like, we'd better have members of the media asking Shane the tough questions. Don't let him off the hook. We need to have answers for why our team looks like this, for how it's going to be remedied, for why he deserves to stay. All of the questions that were asked today of Joe Schoen, the general manager of the Giants here in year four, were questions that you, the Giants fans and the Giants content creators, and those of you who were not able to sit in that room with us and ask Joe Schoen themselves and yourselves, those were questions from the mouths of you guys that you guys typed into your keyboards. And whether I came to the conclusion of what I was going to ask myself, or whether I took some inspiration from one or two of you along the way, it was a collaboration and a it was an exercise in real thought and patience and understanding of what I hope it was an understanding of what the moment meant to the organization and to Shane and to you guys. So I want to say I'm grateful to that, because the whole purpose of building this community here on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard is to foster a conversation, to collaborate, for you guys to learn from me, for me to learn from you, and ultimately for us to have fun, learn something, and be excited to come back the next time. And I hope that my access and my analysis, and in this case, my information and understanding of the reality of the organization and of the NFL, I hope that that resonates with all of you, those of you who are diehard ballers, and those of you who are new to the channel. If you're a Giants fan who is new to this, to what we do here, I am the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer, and I started covering the Giants in the NFL in 2016. And I've been critical of the Giants for a large part of my time covering the organization, but obviously I came in a time where they went to the playoffs quickly, and then for the most part they've stunk. And that the losing has come along with dysfunction, bad hires, rash decisions, meddling, um, controversies. You can throw it all into the pot. And even if you feel like you're on the right track, it can become challenging to consistently be, let's say, going against the grain of how I'm describing something, or what I'm predicting, or what I'm telling you I believe. And if I'm drawing a harsher or more critical or negative conclusion than somebody else. But I hope that this instance, like what I want for everybody to understand coming out of this press conference and this season, and those of you who consume the content that I am privileged enough to create and put there on the internet for you guys to check out, and on social media and in the New York Daily News print form, I hope that you recognize that you are getting something here that you cannot get anywhere else. And that is a combination of access, information, a willingness to speak truth to power, and the prioritization of you, the fans, and ultimately just an effort to try to do my job professionally in the right way. I'm not perfect, but there have been plenty of times when I've been wrong. Those of you who have followed me for a long time will remember me putting on a clown face filter on TikTok and on Instagram several years ago in 2022 when I think they predicted them to win 4 games and they made the playoffs. So, you know, no one's perfect. No one hits the nail on the head all the time. But I just want you guys to understand right now that because there's just a lot of noise out there, there's a lot of voices, and there's a lot of people telling you to look at them and consume their content. And I just hope that when it comes to the Giants and when it comes to the NFL, that today and my willingness to ask the hard questions, but to do it fairly, it's not personal, right? And you noticed, right? Joe Schoen was polite with me and he was understanding of them all being fair questions, even if they were hard questions. So I hope you understand all of that. Now, I'm grateful to all of you for being here. I am the last one here, I believe, from the media in the facility. Tons of people were in here today doing a lot of work on very little sleep. So I wasn't the only one. But I'm here because I want to hear from all of you. I want to hear from the fans. And I saw some really, I've had a lot of hard times and brutal experiences with social media, with the Giants fan base as a whole, really, right? And today has to be one of the most entertaining days on social media because of the outpouring of support from you guys, from fans all over. And I would ask any of you who are here in the chat right now, I posted it on social media. I told everybody we were going live. But those of you who are in here now, please share right now on your social media channels, on X, on Instagram, whatever. Please tell more Giants fans to jump in here now because I'm willing to answer whatever questions you have about Shane, about where this is going, about the coaching search. And I want to give you guys a true understanding of how I see things. All right. So let's get into the chat queue here. So first of all, before we get started with all the questions, reminder, and as you see, I'm filming this on YouTube directly. So I don't have my normal overlay that has all the sponsor information there. But please support the sponsors of this podcast, Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Our sponsors here are Hooks, Rubs, and Spices at hooksrub.com with the code Talkin Ball. Get a special discount there for rub spices for home gating, tailgating, whatever it is. Go to Hooks, Rubs, and Spices today. Check it out. All Texas barbecue flavor, all natural, organic, allergen free, and you will love it. Jared, our good friend and supporter of the pod, has been um, has been a day oneer here on Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard, and we are proud to support Hooks, Rubs, and Spices here on Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard. So again, it's hooksrub.com, and the code is Talkin Ball. Secondly, we are sponsored by MyBookie Sportsbook. MyBookie's code is Leonard, Leonard. If you go to MyBookie, type in the code Leonard, think you'll get a special bet boost right away to kick it off. And the most important thing to know about my bookie is I understand that in some states you already have a sports book and that might be the place you want to go. But the important thing to know about my bookie is there's plenty of states out there that don't allow a lot of these other betting sites or apps to function. And my bookie functions everywhere. So we have a lot of people who follow us here on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard who live all over the country, all over the world. Subscribers to our channel over in Europe, everywhere. I could rave about how awesome it is sometimes to hear where you guys are from when you're loading the questions into the chat. It's awesome to hear how many Giants fans are all over the world and all over the country, and also how many um just how much support there is. You think of it always as locally in your head because that's where you are, wherever your feet are. But when we do these, I'm always reminded of how much passion there is out there for this team, for this sport, for this fan base, and for this channel here. So my bookie, that's where you're going to place all your bets. I actually went 11-5 against the spread this week. So we're back, baby. We're back. 11-5 against the spread. Pat's picks is cooking. So look for those picks every week on social media. I usually post them first on my Instagram account. PL on NFL is the handle there. Also, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a long-standing sponsor of the show. We love Boom Chaga here. Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. It has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health. Also can be something that you just take for a little boost. I got buddies on my basketball team who take it before games. I take it before games. I put it in my coffee in the morning. Go to boomchaga.com today. Check it out. They also have cold teas. Use the code TalkinBall25 there. Last but not least, Salaretta for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey. They've got the best luxury menswear and tailoring. Whatever it is, a wedding or you're just trying to look fresh or a formal event, go to Salaretta for Men in Bergen County. Tell them that Pat Leonard of Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard and the New York Daily News sent you, and they will hook you up. Actually, Brian Daboll, when he was the head coach here, every time we went to the owners' meetings and he put on a nice button-down shirt, more often than not, it was from Salaretta for Men. I called him out on it one time. I said, Salaretta. He goes, Salaretta, because I was rocking it too, sitting there in my sport coat. And Salaretta, of course, also sponsors our arrivals videos every week from wherever the Giants are playing home and away. So we're very grateful to them. All right, so here's how the chat works. If you purchase a super chat or super sticker, your comment or question will be elevated to the top of the queue. So I already see a couple in the queue, and those will be the first comments or questions that I address. And then we will go in order in the chat from there. So right now, looks like I'm looking at the first super chat is from Laner. Laner checks in with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Laner. He says, "Thank you for speaking for all Giants fans today. You were amazing. In your gut, do you think Shane will survive? Hard Knocks will be a disaster for him." One more reminder I have for you guys. You see those thumbs up buttons, whether it's on somebody's comment or whether it's on the channel in general. Please hit those thumbs up or those like buttons on your side of the screen. That helps. Like I said, when I asked you to recommend um, this this live chat to people elsewhere on social media, I'm also asking you now here on YouTube, just hit those like buttons that you like this channel, that you like this chat, because the algorithm takes that, it feeds it, and it tells football fans, Giants fans who are out there who are unaware of what we're doing here, or maybe they had it bookmarked, but they didn't know what time I was going to go live. Whatever it is, those that engagement helps a lot, brings more people into the community. And the other thing that our good friend Jacob in the chat always reminds people is to hit the like button, or not just the like button, but hit subscribe to the channel. So please subscribe to the channel as well as hitting the like button, because if you subscribe, you'll get all of our news, information, and analysis. You can turn notifications on the YouTube channel here. So anytime I post post something new or have a special guest on the podcast, then that content comes right to you. And we're working on building more perks into the channel. We also have a merch store open on Shopify. There's a link in my bio. You can check out at the top of my YouTube channel. There's a link in my bio that says that'll take you to that Shopify store. There also should be a little icon, I believe, in the middle of the screen here with a couple of merchandise items tagged, one of our t-shirts and one of our pint glasses that you can order. Definitely, I'm getting great feedback. If you go to the store, the beanies, the Talkin Ball like winter hats, getting a lot of play there. And I got a black and white one that I wore once or twice on here, and I wear it all the time. All right. So Laner said, in my gut, do I think Joe Shane will survive and Hard Knocks will be a disaster for him? So, first, I will say this: Hard Knocks being a disaster, we will see about that because remember, it's NFC East. It's not just Giants anymore. So, we have the Eagles and their dysfunction going on. We have the Cowboys and their kind of, at least right now, some ascension in the division and gaining momentum, gaining steam. They're always a big time watch. The Commanders this week had a crazy catch by Treylon Burks. Will probably get some play. And then, with the Giants, at least for this week, I definitely expect some Jameis Winston content. And I think they put out a teaser that has Jameis involved a little bit. But you got to cover the special play he made on Bullseye in Detroit. And that was really the first game, I believe, that Hard Knocks was tracking them. So maybe a little bit of dart. Who knows if Scadaboo's involved? But I think there's going to be some vibes related things that aren't exactly like a total disaster for Joe Shane and the Giants early. And to be honest with you, I don't know anything like specifically. No one has told me this. But after the way that Hard Knocks offseason went for the Giants and how frustrated they were with how that went and how much conversation there was around the league from teams about really just not being interested in participating that after watching how poorly the Giants came off. I think those sensitivities and the management of it will probably result in this being a much softer version when it comes to how the Giants are covered, is my guess. But I'll be interested to see how they end up functioning and how the Giants come off on in totality in the series. Excited to see the first episode. Then to your other question, in my gut, do I think Joe Shane will stay or be fired? I think that there were moments today that he sounded defiantly confident, and there were other moments today where he sounded concerned. He definitely said out loud what I have been telling you guys for the last several weeks. He said that at the end of the season, ownership will evaluate the entire football operation, and from there, they will make a decision. And he said they should evaluate the entire football operation. Now, does that mean he's definitely staying? No. Does that mean he's definitely going? No. But I think the only way to take that comment is that Shane understands or has been told that everything will be on the table when it comes to an evaluation of this organization and of the operation before they proceed into 2026. Now, there were moments that he sounded extremely confident and he was talking about next year and what they're going to do in the draft and free agency as a given, as if he was definitely going to be involved and as if it's business as usual. But he's not going to say I don't deserve the job, and he's not going to say I'm definitely staying either, right? So I thought that he walked that line in a telling way. Like it's not 100%. And I think I've been telling you guys that, and I think that's what I got from that today. It's not 100% that he's coming back. It's not definite. He's not so secure that he's not nervous, that he's not. a little bit testy. Like I thought his answer to Jordan's question at the very end was interesting, where Jordan asked, what have you thought about if a coach was going to say, "Hey, I'd rather bring my own GM here instead of just inheriting one." He said, "Yeah, we've gotten enough calls. Like, I don't think we're gonna have any problem filling this job." It was like a defiant, kind of curt, um, you know, um, kind of like back up a little bit answer to that. And you could take that as one of two ways. That could be Shane saying, "Don't tell me that everybody's gonna wanna displace me with their own GM. I've already had enough conversations where I'm not concerned about somebody wanting to run me out of here. I feel confident." It could have also been Shane reacting to a nerve being struck. Like that question might have struck the nerve specifically of, "Oh, that's actually a possibility that's actually on the table." So, I think if I had to put my foot down on what is definitely going to happen, I would say that knowing the Giants organization, they will watch the final 4 games, and if they see ample promise, even though the schedule softens, that could sway people with doubt, and if they see the bottom fall out, then that'll make the decision for them too. That's usually how the Giants go. The ownership situation is in flux as far as everybody getting involved in the conversations of who's gonna be in that room making the decision. So, I think that that's a part of it too, but I think the best thing to describe about the Shane situation and where he stands on losing his job or keeping it is that it is not a sure thing that he returns. There was definitely uncertainty on his part today. All right, next super chat goes to No Mets says, "Pat, if you could trade one player, who is it?" Well, I think the Giants do not have a roster that is filled with extremely valuable players, right? When it comes to the trade market. And I think the answer to that would probably be Dexter Lawrence, but it's dangerous to say let's just trade Dexter Lawrence, right? This guy is a two-time second team all pro. When he's playing his best, he is viewed as the best player or one of the 2 to 3 best players at his position in the entire league, and it is a premium position. What I saw from Dexter this season was not the same kind of commitment, not the same kind of physical shape, not the same kind of resolve. He's definitely more a guy who just would rather play rather than lead in any other way. He'd rather lead on the field, which that's okay. Some guys are like that, but I think Dexter needed to give the Giants a lot more than he did this year. But I think his situation is interesting. He's a guy who has watched the Giants get rid of a lot of key players and key leaders and friends of his, Julian Love, Leonard Williams, Saquon Barkley, etc., and Xavier McKinney on defense. And I think Dexter is looking around, and even though there are some other good players on the defense, frankly, there's not many when it comes to people who have proven their worth as rubber stamped NFL starter. Glad we have them. Can't wait to extend them. Like there's just not many guys on this team in that spot anymore. And I think that Dexter is a player in a position who the losing has worn on him. And so I think if you're the Giants, you need to really dig into his commitment his commitment to being a part of this organization after seeing the mismanagement of it. So does that mean you're definitely trading him? No. And I'm not sitting here advocating trade Dexter Lawrence the first second you get. I'm not saying that. I'm answering a question posed in this chat, but I'm just saying he's the one player on your roster that you would get a lot for if you traded him, and there are also signs of discontent. That's what I'm saying. More than signs of discontent. No Met says if you could hire one coach, who would it be? Ooh. I'll be honest with you. I would want to interview all these guys I'm interested in before answering that definitively. I'm not going to be sitting in on the interviews, of course, but I think what I'm saying is I need to continue to dig into these candidates to have a good idea of maybe comparing the top ones to the others. I have said though, and I will say again, like I've heard a lot of good things about Clint Kubiak. Um, I don't know if Chris Shula is the guy. I'm interested to hear more. Anarumo is a name that I know Lou Anarumo as a coach. He was here with the Giants, and he has a great reputation in the league. I'm curious to hear more about him. Mike McCarthy, and also guys, we know. Listen, there's going to be other changes in the NFL right now. Everybody's watching the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. The Ravens and John Harbaugh. A lot of chairs that could be continuing to move. I think I said McCarthy already. Gruden, I'm interested in. Um, let's see. I know I'm leaving somebody out. I know I'm leaving somebody out. I mentioned in last night's chat Clayton Adams with the Cowboys I would want to talk to. Oh, interesting. I had not seen this comment by Kyle before I answered that last question from No Mets on the player. He says, Pat, there's a serious issue with Dexter Lawrence. He was an almost unstoppable force the last few years, but regression is beyond clear. What's the deal? Kyle, it sounds like I answered a lot of that question with my last comment, but largely what happened this year is he had the dislocated elbow and the procedure on his elbow. And then for some reason, he was prevented from doing the same kind of physical work, but deep into the offseason because of that injury and whatever happened with his offseason and his regimen. And he just wasn't physically ready for the season. And that was something that I saw coming the second that he was sitting out on in the spring, and then when we saw him a little bit on the field in the summer, but he was doing conditioning, he just clearly wasn't himself. But again, I just see him as being disengaged. He has slid and regressed with not being in the top physical form. And also, I feel like he's been enabled. You know, when Wink Martindale was here, Dex's star continued to rise. I think that even though he had some sack numbers for the early part of 2024 before his dislocated elbow, that he was not making the same consistent overall impact that we had seen in the 2 years prior. And I believe that being coached by Andre Patterson is more enabling than anything else. The whole Carl Banks, Dexter Lawrence situation and Patterson embarrassing himself speaking at the podium. That was um that was pretty embarrassing and I think indicative though of the way that they operate. So I think he needs a better coach, position coach. Obviously having a new defensive coordinator will help, but also just the organization, you need accountability throughout. Dexter may be one of your best players, but I think that his there's been too much emotional detachment from him this season from the results that are on the field. Last year, he had a hard time emotionally in some of those games, coping with the breakdowns that they were having, what was happening with Deontay Banks, and lack of effort, lack of production, lack of results. And as I said earlier, he's definitely, from my vantage point, flabbergasted by the state of the roster and how many good players and people have been allowed to leave. TL checks in with a super chat. He said, Hi, Pat. Did Shane's responses reek of Pat Hanlon, meaning the Giants' head of PR. New York Giants have always been sensitive, especially Hanlon. Well, Pat's in charge of the messaging and public relations of the organization, so certainly would have worked in some capacity on this, and the PR team in general would have as well. I think that Shane is extreme. I don't think I know Joe Shane's extremely involved the um, in the crafting of the messaging that he wants out there, the narratives that he wants to push or aggressively pursue or clarify. And from my vantage point, he has always gone on the offensive and been proactive himself. He certainly prepares everything he's about to say and studies it, rehearses it. The thing that reeked more of some bad advice was not to me Shane's presser, it was Kafka's presser after the game in New England when he was talking in circles about Abdul Carter and not clarifying for anybody what had actually happened, which left on the table the fake tweets out there about what had actually occurred with Abdul and why he was being punished. And it just put Kafka in a bad spot. Like he looked unprepared as a head coach at the start of the game with that first half and how his team played. And then he looked and sounded unprepared as a coach at the podium after the game. And that to me reeked of some bad advice. But yeah, Shane, the understand the question stuff was definitely a mechanism that I thought that he leaned on too often. And of course, those of you who are in here now, I think see through that, right? All right. Who else do we have with the super chat? Super chats always go first, and then we get back into the queue. Richard Armstrong says, I think we are the first team in history to whiff on both a field goal and a punt. So we Giants fans have something to be proud of. Good call, Richard. Making history. The Giants continue to make history. All right. Who else do we have in here? Thank you for those super chats. All right, Andrew says, Pat, I'm just sad as a fan that this man still has a job. Derek says Shane needs one more year. He's got this. Thank you for your service today, says Fred. Thank you. Hunter says Joe's dodging of your question says a lot about his whole tenure in New York. For those of you who don't know what Hunter's talking about, and this is definitely what Fred is alluding to too. I tried to ask the tough questions today. The questions I asked were, why is Dable and the coaches held accountable for these results, but you are not in year 4? I asked him about if he misevaluated how much leadership meant to the organization and to the locker room, letting all of these key players go. And then we had a 3 question and answer back and forth about what exactly Shane's place was in the failures and in the losing. Because as I said at the start, the 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 Giants and Joe Shane have not gotten results. They're 3-22 in their last 25, and they're 5-25 in their last 30. And Joe Shane was saying it starts with me, it's on me, but he was stopping short at connecting his player mistakes to the field. Like a key moment in the presser was when he was going over his selling points on the roster. And he mentioned that the defense was 30th at this point in the league last year. And he said, now we added all these players, and he rattled off all these guys they added: Abdul Carter, Paulson Adebo, Javon Holland, Roy Robertson Harris, Chauncey Golston. And he says, and we're still 30th. And he goes, did that catch me by surprise? Yes, it did. I did not expect that. But he said, we're going to continue to work at it. And that I thought was a good example of how his sales job works. He is on one hand acknowledging his moves, and on the other hand acknowledging the state of the defense, but he's not connecting the fact that his player evaluations weren't strong, right? So that's where I was getting at with Joe Shane and that back and forth was, don't you see the connection between the players that you are talking about and the lack of results? And, he did at times say, I'm responsible for this. I have to be better with personnel. But there were other moments where he said, we're going to go over everything, like the coaching staff and coordinators and strength and conditioning staff. It's like, whoa, where did the strength and conditioning staff start catching strays? Where did that come from? Right? This is what happened. It's like just as you think he might be taking accountability, a little finger pokes out and starts pointing somewhere else. All right, we got a couple extra super chats in the queue. Tyree jumps in and says, can you tell me the narrative behind Bill Belichick? Why he doesn't get any love? Is it just age? I don't care about his girlfriend or college stuff. No, so there's the lawsuit, right? The Brian Flores lawsuit with Belichick's text messages, texting congratulations to Flores accidentally when Brian Dable already had the job and Flores was interviewing and expecting to hear. And that obviously put the Giants in a really bad light. That is still ongoing, that lawsuit, that litigation, and that case. And then on the other side, the so that's from a Giants point of view, the love for Bill Belichick has waned for that reason. And then on the flip side, you have Belichick who recommended Joe Judge to the Giants. The Giants hired Joe Judge and they promised him 3 years to turn around the franchise. And also the idea behind that hiring was that after the first season, Joe Judge would have the opportunity to add his own general manager, right? Like to essentially Dave would ride off into the sunset or slump off into the sunset, and Joe Judge would bring in somebody who was like-minded, who was on the same page, and they would have some alignment, which Judge and Gettleman did not have as a kind of forced marriage. And not only did so basically the Giants broke both of those promises. They did not let him hire his own GM. They forced him to stay with Dave another year, and then the and then they fired him after 2 years instead of giving him the 3 they had promised him, and that didn't sit well with Bill. And so those are 2 instances of recent fraying of the relationship between Belichick and the Giants. But it's just an icier relationship than you can imagine or that you're used to hearing about. And that's why Belichick released that statement that he's not a candidate. Joey B says Joe Shane said we're not going to repeat the same mistake twice, but he did that with Saquon and Daniel Jones. He has to go. Good point, Joey B. That's very well said. Very well said. And I would say he repeated the same mistake with all of the players we named earlier. Joe Shane or Julian Love, Xavier McKinney, Leonard Williams, Saquon Barkley, repeating the mistake of getting lost in the X's and O's and this player for that player and all the analytics and all the charts you have up on the board and forgetting about what these guys mean to the fabric of your team. What is it going to do to your team when you rip up that chemistry, when you change that chemistry meaningfully, right? And so that's a great point, Joe. I did not think of that. That's a really good point. Joey B, a day oneer, my man. Leo says, do you think we'll finally get things right this offseason? We can't take this anymore, Pat. I'm too young to have heart palpitations. I do think there's hope for a clearing of the deck this offseason from the standpoint of getting Shane out and bringing in new blood. And obviously, in coaching cycles, it's all cyclical, right? It always goes from like Ben McAdoo loses the locker room. Pat Shermer comes in as a veteran voice, and a steady hand. Doesn't work out that way. And so the locker room continues to stay too loose. So Joe Judge gets brought in, and he's the, structure, bring it back to what the Giants are known for: discipline, fundamentals, toughness. And then the Giants buck that and abandon that plan a year earlier than they promised. And then in comes Brian Daboll, the player friendly coach, right? And so now we're back to, okay, you have some promising talent, as far as some of the younger players, but issues with discipline, accountability. Abdul Carter, Malik Neighbors, all this stuff. Scadaboo, even a guy who is, you know, uh, clearly going to be in the news one way or another, even if it's not a distraction, but is definitely someone to continue to follow in the entertainment circuit. And so they just need somebody to get their hands around it, to get their hands around the team. But they need an entire operation to select better players, to get on the same page with that coach. And I honestly think it's an interesting dynamic because in the coaching search, I think if Joe Schoen is, yeah, so you say you want to hire a coach with experience, but if you hire a coach like a Tomlin, or a Gruden, somebody with that strong of a personality and desire to put their imprint on every part of the organization, if that's your intent to hire that guy, I think those candidates are less likely to keep Shane. They're going to have their own idea of the person they want there because those guys are going to have a lot of influence in the personnel themselves. But for Shane, it's probably safer for him to go the coordinator route or the Kafka route, right? Or the Clint Kubiak or whatever it is, because then that person maybe is more willing to play ball in that respect and keep the separation of church and state. All right, stay in the queue. Thank you to all you super chatters. So Leo, do I think they get it right? I think I think keeping Shane would be not getting it right. I think firing him would be the first step to it. Kyle says so many other players on the defense have underperformed or regressed. Newbin and Okereke to name a few that stick out. Not worth mentioning. Banks. Yeah, one of our diehards the other day said something about development being a problem, and certainly, even though we're talking a lot of Joe Shane today, certainly the lack of development on the coaching side of things is a problem here. So, this is not a conversation about, you know, the coaching has been fine and Joe Shane is the only problem. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying it all is, and that blame belongs to everybody. But absolutely, you're right. The development is either delayed here or doesn't happen. Christopher says, "Great job today, Pat. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that, Christopher. Really appreciate you." All right, let's get back into the chat. A reminder, if you purchase a super chat or a super sticker, we will go right to you. But otherwise, going back into the chat, let's see. No Met says Theo is overrated. Barb says Shane needs to go. Hunter says, hope your Thanksgiving was good as well as everyone else. Same to you. Hooks Rub, that's Jared from Hooks Rubs and Spices, says, what's up, Pat and chat? Watching from the gym, had to work out this latest bad game with some weights. Didn't get to watch the Shane press conference. Oh, Hooks, you might want to go watch that, which actually the full Shane press conference is available on the channel here. So you can go hop over, watch the full Joe Shane press conference if you want, or you can just watch it after this. But definitely a an active day for me when it comes to trying to hold the Giants and the GM accountable and really doing the work of trying to get to the bottom of what's going wrong with the Giants. Joey B says, I feel like Joe was definitely pissed off today with the questions you were asking. Keep up the good work, Pat. Thank you, Joey B. Whether whether he was pissed off or not, I think definitely what you saw there is, like I said, Joe's good at this. He was very prepared, right? But what I think is important to see there is I think by holding him down on a key issue that needed to be answered, in my opinion, in fairness to what the fans want to know and to how this gets fixed, Joe Shane was not prepared for that layer of digging into a key issue that is not a positive one for him. And so what I thought you saw was an off script Joe Shane and not an on script Joe Shane. Thank you, Joey B. Thanks for paying in. Again, you're the man. Kelvin says my hero. Good stuff, Pat. Thank you, Kelvin. No Met says Theo can't shed tackles, can't catch it consistently, is overrated. I'll agree with the way Shane described him today. He said he's had some flashes. And that is the perfect way to describe him if you're going to say positively is he has had flashes. But to your point, it's not a full product. It's not a we have a tight end, check, we're fine. No Met says team looked the absolute worst after the firings. K Mac says great job today, Pat. Thank you. Thanks, K Mac. Derek says, why did he even do the presser? What could have he possibly said there to save face other than I quit? Well, Derek, he talks at every bye week, and so that's why he spoke now. And to be honest, I thought that the moment for him to speak should have been after they fired Daboll because as he made clear today, even though he called it an ownership decision, he then said, I supported it. At another point, he said, we decided on this decision. So the fact that he was not up there talking about Brian Daboll's firing right after it, I thought was ridiculous. And so that's when I thought he really should have spoken. Hook says the only thing you see in Theo is the hatred of losing so bad. Saw multiple games now with the look of disgust or anger after a loss or defense not being able to hold a lead. He has got fight. Yes, he does. Hope we have a great regime change and culture change, says Jared. Yep. Carter is more important than the team, says A2. Yeah, no, he needs to get his priorities in order, and he needs people around him to remind him of that. Pat, you almost had Shane in tears, says Barb. A2, hey, Barb, what's up? A2 says, I understand your question, Pat. You're funny. No Met says, Pat is a rising star. Thank you, No Met. Thank you for saying that. Barb says, where was the RPO yesterday? Barb, my vantage point is they told Jackson not to run much, especially early, and so they were running either read options or designs to look like the RPOs, but they were not running the consistent action for Jackson to get out and run, specifically to try to keep him healthy and work him as a pocket passer. Obviously, though, doesn't play to his strengths. Ryan says, hi, Pat. You're the man. Thanks for asking the tough questions that matter. You did an awesome job. Joe was puzzled for words because he knows he does not belong there. Thank you, Ryan, for saying that. I really appreciate that. Looks like we got some more super chats in the queue. Appreciate you guys. Let's see. It is Richard Armstrong says, does Christian Ellis have a history of tackling with his helmet, or did we just hit him on a bad night? Ooh, I don't know that off the top of my head. I don't think he's known as a dirty player. I I genuinely don't know. Nothing crossed my face or no one I talked to last night around the league about after the game or with the Giants, like no one was pointing that out to me. The gunner play was a fluky one. Like that was like a player being tackled and kind of being rolled around, and then as he was diving to make the hit, like that was not like a, "Oh, I'm gonna tee off and hit this guy in the head," type play. Um, so And then the dart hit was legal and just that was football. Hooks Rub says heard the game plan was to have Dart run less and design runs and have more in the pocket. Yes, exactly. Kevin says good job today, Pat. Thank you. Casey says great job. Thank you. KTS says great job today, Pat. Thanks. Yeah, Derek Joe Shane isn't perfect either. Way to drop the hammer, Pat says Bommy Sand. Thank you. We understand your talking points, Kevin. You're funny. It was time for some accountability. It got the sense. Null Void says I got the sense from his presser he doesn't know if his job is safe or not. Null Void, thanks for paying in last night. Yeah, I agree. Like it did not seem like Shane knew confidently he was on definitively solid footing. Understood the questions, didn't answer them. Pat, you were amazing today, says Dan. Joe dodged your question brilliantly. Typical Joe Shane. Glad you asked the hard questions. Thank you. Steven says, do I think Shane is gone? I think there's a chance he is. Pat, put that hibachi grill flame to Shane, says Big Dog. You're the man, Pat says Leo. That word to my mother. Thank you. Pat, is Joe gone? Because that was bad. Great questions, by the way. Thanks. I think there's a chance he is, but not definitively, but not definitely staying either. Definitely on shaky ground. I just don't, there is no argument. Again, like I said at the top of the show, for those of you who jumped in late, my, for those of you who jumped in late, my, my goal today was to, was to get to the bottom of where Joe Shane truly felt like he was accountable or why he was not accountable because he kept his job while Dable got fired and Shane Bowen got fired. And what I came out of that press conference understanding about Shane's sales job and about where he stands and the Giants stand is there's a conversation going on here that is Shane saying that there are pieces on the roster and the team is good, but it's disconnected from the actual results on the field and from the numbers and the stats and the wins and the losses and what actually matters. And so I believe, and I have enough faith in the Giants ownership, I do, that despite some positive feelings about Joe Shane in this building with people high up at the ownership level, I believe that they know 3-22 and 5-25 and what is it, 5-17 and 1 in division, I think it is, and 2-14 or something like that against the Cowboys and the Eagles. I believe that Giants ownership knows enough is enough. But again, I could be I could be dead wrong, but I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt here. Jimbo says Pat did his best Regina George today. Great job. Thank you. All right, let's see. A lot of questions today. Thank you all for being in this chat. This is Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard. I am the Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer here in New York. And this is my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, please rate and review, and please support our sponsors, My Bookie, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, and Sal Loretta for Men. All right. Man, a lot of questions in here. All right, let's see. Got to try to get to all of them. I'm going to try to get the feed up here. Easier to read on my computer. I'm doing it on my phone right now. All right. So looks like we got another super chat in the queue. Dan says Shane let McKinney walk last offseason, then turns around and signs the top safety on the market this year in Holland. Make it make sense. Dan, great point. And that's along the lines of what Joey B was talking about earlier. Joey B's point was that Shane said we won't make the same mistakes twice, but there you are pointing out a conflicting philosophical decision from the general manager. He's saying one thing and doing another. And by doing that, he's essentially making the same mistake twice. And by overcompensating, right? By saying like, "Oh crap, I robbed our I robbed our team of a really good player and a good leader in Xavier McKinney." By doing that, he then created a hole that he got more desperate to fill. And that's how they ended up drafting Tyler Nubin as high as they did at safety, and how they ended up signing Javon Holland. All right, so let's see. Looks like we got another chat in the queue. Joey B says, Pat, when you're talking ball live in person Saturday night before the Cowboys game, let's make it happen. Cigars, food, and football. That's the last game of the season, right? Yeah, Joey B, I'm with you. I hope to get that done. We got to talk. Um, we got to talk soon. You're the man. Nobody like Joey B, who of course was a terrific guest on Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard earlier this season, and was bringing a lot of good information and passion um, to this channel. And I credit Joey B with being among one of the best day oneers and supporters of the work that we do here. Does Brandon Brown get a fair shot at GM if Joe gets canned, says Bo. I don't have anyone telling me yes or no, but I know that the conversations I have had, like no one has raved to me about Brandon Brown being a clear star who the Giants definitely need to give immediate love to in the form of an interview and the GM job when and if Joe Schoen gets canned. So I guess that's where I come down on that. All right, let's see. No Mets says thoughts on Odell Beckham Jr. saying 60 million is enough. He said it is enough or it isn't enough. I think he might have said it isn't enough. But yes, it $60 million. I could definitely live on that. Let's say that. Let's see. All right. All right. Our queue and our chat is cooking right now here on Talking Ball live with Pat Leonard. Thank you all for being here. New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. Some of you who are new here, I see some people talking about like the too many ads on the channel or something like that. So usually I do this through like StreamYard at a different platform, and I regulate the ads to a certain level. There may be more than usual popping in today. I'm doing a live directly on YouTube right now, and I did not set any kind of I did not create any kind of crazy setting when it comes to like wanting a ton of ads to make a crazy amount of money or anything like that. Like I didn't do that. So if there are too many ads popping up today, um, I will definitely try to get to the bottom of why that is on the YouTube and figure that out. But thanks for the feedback. I always appreciate the feedback. All right, let's see. Like I said, those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. And if you are new or if you're regulars and if you're back here as a diehard baller here on Talking Ball, If you want to, please put a link out there on your channels elsewhere. Tell people to jump in, join in. Because, like I said at the start of our channel of our show today, today was today was a group effort when it comes to Giants content creators and fans and myself and the Giants beat, trying to take Joe Schoen and the Giants to task on the realities of the situation to get to the bottom of how to fix this. And I'm grateful to all of you, and I want to continue growing this community because it's all about getting to the bottom of this and turning it around. I just saw somebody said Pat is the voice of the people. Thanks for saying that. Pat is an assassin, says D Kit. Let's see. Anybody, if you want to ask me something, personally as well, you could direct message me on Instagram, PL and NFL. I'll try to hit those when I can. Chef says, thank you, Pat. Thanks for the insight, Tyree. Jackson says, good work. Shock Treatment says, you were our voice today. Great job today, Pat. Thanks for doing it. Thank you, everybody who is appreciative of the work I put in today and what we did. James says Saquon isn't playing well this season. No, he's having a rough year. Definitely connected to the Eagles' offensive line having a bad year and them also having a new play caller. It's all not going well. Um, that was actually a weird and funny moment with Shane today. I asked him the leadership question, and in discussing how it's not just about leadership, he said, "Listen, we want to rush the passer, protect the passer, and add a new quarterback." And so that was a part of the process. So it's a swinging doors effect. So he said, if we if we keep the safety, we don't get the pass rusher. And then he said, if we keep the running back, we don't get the Jermaine Illuminors and the John Runyons. And he said, some of these positions you need one to help another. And first of all, it takes some ego for Joe Schoen to bring up Saquon Barkley in any positive way that he thinks reflects well on himself. After he let this guy go to his arch rival and lead them to a Super Bowl, but also it was like that kind of pettiness, right? Like pointing out kind of subtly, like, hey, the guy's not having a good year this year because the offensive line isn't as good. So Daniel says, thanks for asking the tough questions for us fans. Appreciate it. Hunter says, look how good the Seattle defense is in terms of leadership, two of our leaders. Let's see. Felt like Bounty Gate last night. That's a good comment. Tiger says, thanks, Pat. You're the best when you ask Joe the real questions. Thank you. Dan points out that Jalen Hurts looks like a shell of his former self with the Eagles, you will probably see some interesting stuff on Hard Knocks with them tonight on HBO. And yeah, absolutely. I would say this about Jalen Hurts. He looked as disconnected and disinterested as I can remember seeing. Definitely him, but I mean, what athletes and quarterbacks do you see normally looking like that on a sideline in a game that's not over? You're not getting blown out. It was just things weren't working, and there is clearly something wrong with that team from a chemistry level, from an execution level, from a trust level. The Eagles could be on the verge of completely breaking. Crazy how sports work sometimes. Shock even says Pat was Kobe today, ice in his veins. Let's see. How does Joe say with a straight face that he's gotten better than the year before? SPN says. Yeah, I mean, in that sense, he's just trying to make the best argument for himself. Pat, if you're a betting man, what chances are there that Shane survives? Uh, I'll say 60-40 that he survives. Something like that. Last night hurt, Pat. Great job today, says Unk Gaming. Would love to see Gruden kick ass here. Lack of discipline is unreal. It's like having a substitute teacher for the entire school year. Really good analogy there. Fest is laughing about Shane bringing up Chris Manhertz. And listen, I love Chris Manhertz. Great guy. He is a leader and a great presence in the locker room and all of that. But yeah, Shane's leadership answer calling on Devin Singletary, Chris Manhurst, things like that. Listen, and he said at one point, he goes, "You don't need your best players to be your biggest leaders, even though that helps." But he goes, "There's not thousands of guys out there in the league like that." Uh, to be a great team, yes, you do need your best players to be your biggest leaders. To be a winning team, a consistent winning team, yes, yes, you do. And he pointed to Jackson Dart as showing those signs and being like that. But um, yeah, the manners comment was funny because it was like this team's 2-11. So it's like, oh yeah, no, look, our 2-11 team has leaders like this tight end who doesn't play a huge role, and this running back who doesn't always play a significant role. You know, let's see. I see a bunch of coaching questions. I do like the idea of Kubiak. I'm interested in hearing more about Shula. I've heard positive things about both. I think ideally you want head coaching experience, but it depends on what that class looks like when all is said and done. Pat, do the league offices with the NFL ever get involved with teams being an embarrassment to the league? Yeah, well, that's how the Giants ended up with George Young. He was with the Dolphins, and the NFL commissioner recommended him and essentially appointed him to the Giants. John Mara's version of that story is that his father and his uncle were basically at odds, and his father knew that if he recommended George Young, that the uncle would turn it down, so that Wellington told the commish, "Hey, why don't you recommend as an outside voice that we bring in George Young?" And then so the league got involved, and that was how the Giants ended up eventually building their first 2 Super Bowl teams. It started with the NFL getting involved. Tomlin is a possibility if he gets fired in Pittsburgh for sure, but again, it's like it's definitely it's definitely the kind of thing like for sure any team that has a vacancy is going to be interested in Mike Tomlin once he is no longer the Steelers head coach. So then it become competitive. Let's see. A2 says you did well, Pat. Can't wait till Mara's presser where he once again says this is not acceptable as he accepts it again. Should be fun. I think, yeah. Listen, let's say this about John Mara, Mr. Mara, is that the only thing I have to say about Mr. Mara in this is, and John Mara is praying for him, thinking of him, and hope that he continues to battle and fight and win his battle and fight. And he's a good man, and they've been through tough times with the franchise, but life, family, health is most important. And as far as how we talk today about John Mara, Mr. Mara, that's all I'm going to say today is, um, you know, yes, I covered the team critically. Yes, I work to hold people accountable and to try to tell what I feel is the truth. And oftentimes that's harsh and maybe not what somebody in the Giants ownership seat or in the organization wants to hear. But um, it's not personal, and I've always been grateful, and I always will be grateful to John for welcoming me in to his office. I think it was 2019 when they hired Pat Shermer, and I did a one-on-one interview with him and a profile on him, and for the New York Daily News, and um, it was very much a great experience, and I appreciated his trust that he was willing to let me in and to have that conversation and to do that interview. And I think the story turned out great. And that was a great experience for a still growing young reporter trying to make an impact. For those of you who are jumping in now, jumping in new to the chat, if you haven't been here yet before, this is Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. I'm the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer here at the Giants facility still after Joe Shane's press conference, hours after Joe Shane's press conference and being in the locker room, entering the Giants bye week. And of course, an eventful day, an eventful week, a total beatdown in New England, followed by an intriguing and interesting and layered press conference with the general manager. Here to take your questions and break it down. Hunter says, did Dable hate Devin Singletary? He's playing a lot now that he's gone and hasn't played bad. There was definitely a rotation there, and I think it was more about riding the hot hand than anything. And remember, Singletary was a Dable guy in Buffalo. Also, remember though that um, that when Dable had Singletary in Buffalo, they never ran the ball. I always said that when they signed him here. That was a funny thing about them signing him. Jerry says, "Thank you, Pat, for everything you do. All superheroes don't wear capes." Those of you who are new to the channel, if you want your comment or question answered first, you can purchase a super chat or super sticker. Otherwise, I'm jumping around in the queue, um, trying to answer as many questions as I can in order. It's tough though. We're deep into the chat now. All right, let's see. Sounded like Joe keeps a blind spot with the run defense. It's very well said, Bommy. Worst run defense in the league by yards per carry and yards per game, and 30th in the league in yards allowed and points allowed. Leo says, Pat, are you a Giants fan too, or just a reporter? Just a reporter. You know, I've disclosed this on here many times, but I am from Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I grew up a Notre Dame fan. And when I went to Notre Dame as a college student and I became a reporter there for the student newspaper, there were weekends where I was in the stands rooting for the Irish as a student, and then there were weekends I was wearing a shirt and tie and dressed up in the press conference working as a reporter. And I had a very early experience, even going back to my days at Holy Ghost Prep in Ben Salem, running the student newspaper there, of really working hard to be that objective voice covering whatever team I was. And honestly, it creates some frustration as a sports fan because eventually you get to the point where sometimes you feel like you can't enjoy the um your teams enough, right? Like that's kind of what happened with Notre Dame at times. It's like, oh my God, I remember, like I grew up rooting for the Flyers, for example, in hockey. And when I covered the Rangers, I eventually got to the point where I covered the Winter Classic in Philadelphia Citizens Bank Park, and it was like I felt nothing covering the game. And it was really a weird feeling, but it did indicate to me that I had taken the objectivity seriously enough. But it also puts you in a weird place where sometimes you can't be the sports fan that you want to be because you've grown out of it and it's become your profession. But obviously, a small price to pay to do what was always my dream job, and I'm still grateful to do. Dan checks in with a super chat and says, has your relationship with Shane been turbulent since you called him out on trying to trade Tony, which he denied but was ultimately true? Yes. Yeah, I think more than anything, Joe has a strategy for how to operate. And I think he's not alone, but what I mean, he's not alone around the league in doing this. This is a common thing. But the the strategy from my vantage point that Joe Shane has employed since he's been the general manager here, but it ramped up more aggressively as they got under more pressure and started losing more, is to spread information and preferred narratives through the national media to almost combat the local reporting. And there is some give and take at the local level, but by and large, there are times where it feels like an us versus them scenario rather than a working relationship. And when those types of instances happen, where I report something he doesn't want out, and because he's managing so closely and tightly the narrative, in his mind, he's gonna be able to reset people's expectations, and he's gonna put his version of the truth out there, and he's gonna correct it and shut me down. And really, I remember in that press conference, he tried to embarrass me. Is the way I felt about it at the time. It was kind of like he was playing a semantics game with language and trying to dunk on me essentially. And I think he learned his lesson not to try to do that after doing that, given the fact that everything that I said had happened or was going to happen did. And he knew at the time that what I was saying was true. He was just trying to protect, himself, the organization, and the message. But so relationship then becomes a challenging thing to navigate when that's the dynamic. But ultimately, it comes down to wins and losses. It's not personal. And, um, you know, I think you guys could probably see, I'm sure, during the presser today, the first, and I saw somebody say it looks like Shane calls on you a lot. I mean, it's a longer press conference. He doesn't talk often. And I asked him 5 questions. And so, yes, the last exchange with the three in a row where I got him off script and was challenging him was, tense, emotional, etc. But the first two, if you noticed, he called on me. Yeah, Pat. There was another one where I kind of got shouted down as everybody was trying to get their questions in, and he looked at me and said, "I'll come back to you." And so it's not disrespectful, even if there's challenging and rockiness. I didn't view, I think you could see in those moments, like you can go back and watch them for yourself on camera. Like it's not a personal disrespect happening in the working environment. That's how it should be. I did miss a couple super chats. Sorry about that. Anyone have a clue who Wes Steinberg really is? Says TL. I do not. I do not. Anybody who covers the team and has a sense of humor, will always make a joke now and then that it's you or it's me or whatever, because so many of the things that account puts out there just have enough of a tinge of potential truth to them that you can't completely discount most of them. And they're also usually they're usually dead on when it comes to like hitting the nerve. So it feels like somebody who has to be too plugged in, right? And can't just be like some random person. But I think I saw somebody on X identified them as somebody being in England at one point based on what X was saying as far as geography, but I don't know. Do you think Dable and Shane are still friendly? I know their relationship is never going to be the same. I mean, the families, the wives, the general manager and the coach, these are all people who were friends and came here from Buffalo together and formed a new community down here together. And so um will never be the same. And as I said, it got icy last year, coming out of last season, the autopsy of last season. Jared Hooksrub says, "Thanks, Pat and chat. You have a great week. Going to watch Zootopia 2 with my daughter. Go G man." Thanks, Jared. See, Omar says, "Long time. Got to give you your flowers. You came in with the heat up and in. Thank you so much." Romans, we are not agreeing that we missed Dave Gettleman. He was a sham general manager, did absolutely nothing, was lazy, was a finger pointer, was a backstabber, arguably the worst general manager ever. And the only reason it's arguably is because Shane and his numbers have been just as bad, if not worse. Craig says Pat's the best. Just say you were an Eagles fan. We don't care, says Randy. Yeah, no, I grew up in Philadelphia as an Eagles fan. But that was the point I was making. You're right. I did omit that sentence from what I said there, but um, yeah, that's where I grew up. But no, I don't root for a team anymore. Um, it's not a luxury that I have, unfortunately. What I always tell people, this is the God's honest truth, is I root for players now, like individuals, and that could be coaches, could be executives, um, but like a lot of what happens, like what happened with me covering the Rangers in hockey was I'd been a Flyer growing up, but after a Flyers fan growing up, but after covering the Rangers for 5 years, they go to three conference finals and a Stanley Cup final. And, I watch the Rangers closer now and root for them more than I watch the Flyers. And so that's what happens, with me being around the Giants so long. It's like you start to root for all these players who were here and then they start to fan out around the league and you still have relationships with them and all that. E-man, stop saying Gettleman is better than Shane. You're saying Shane is only winning season was with Gettleman, guys. Easy schedule that year, but stop saying Gettleman was good. He was horrible, horrible. Joe Judge made some of the picks that you're talking about. Dave Gettleman, horrible general manager. Thanks for really digging for answers, Pat. It really exposed him, says Ezeki. Thank you so much. Yes, Jacob says you even brought up the question I had last night about Xavier and Saquon and them. Yes, exactly. And Jacob, this is what I was saying earlier about this entire community of Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard here and the community we have here with all the diehard ballers and the content creators and the fans online on social media tagging me and putting their suggested questions. This all primed the pump for what today became. Right about the Tony trade. Let's say Ray Finkel says we take all the nice things we said back. You're funny. Um, what we got? What exactly happened with Abdul Carter? I believe Dan Duggan reported this afternoon that there may have been some confusion on whether he was still on the punt team, but that it turned out he missed a special teams meeting, and so that was what he missed in the mistake that he made. Jacob says, "Massive salutes, Pat. You had Joe shaking. Maybe Pat Hanlon should be fired if he told Joe, just say you understand the question and you'll be fine," says Richard Armstrong. SBN says of the Brandon Brown idea, we want nobody associated with the last draft classes unless he or she speaks up and out on the team. Can't trust any of them. Randy says Joe Shane looked nervous and uncomfortable during that whole presser today. No way he can lead this team in 2026. Let's see. Mr. Fine says salute Pat. Great work today. Tiger says the same thing. Do you think he had gotten fired? Ray Finkel says, did you think Shane had been fired when the presser was being delayed? Yes, I thought there was a chance of that. In my experience, when you're covering something and there's that kind of delay or awkward moment, um, and you can see that even maybe the PR staff and the employees of the Giants look a little bit uncertain and confused, or looking for answers on things, and the delay is that long. Yes, I did think that was possible. But it was not to be today. All right, let's see. Mr. Farmboy says, was Jerry Reese good? Reese was combative when it came to doing press conferences, but a man of principle. Matthew says, I thought it odd that Shane's tagline was that he was there to support Kafka. No real mention I heard he's involved in the head coaching search. I feel less sure he will stick around. That's a great point, Matthew. Great point. Is that Joe said, my focus now is supporting Kafka, and then we're doing the coaching search. I think that was also an optics comment. He basically didn't want to come out and say, I'm running this coaching search as Mike isn't even participating in it because he's coaching the team. So I think it was more that. But I agree with you. It could be a timeline thing too of, hey, we're not running this search yet, even though we deputized you to. We're doing, we're gonna do that at the end of the year once we decide whether you're staying. But I think it was more about the optics of it. Jimbo says, would your job be more fun if the Giants were good? Oh, absolutely. There are people with the Giants organization who don't believe me when I say this, but the God's honest truth is what I want more than anything is for them to be good and relevant so that I can write a book and it sells like hotcakes, like all of the reasons why um professionally people respond to you, right? Like we're in a business right now where what sells usually is either winning or dysfunction. And so there are times where dysfunction is entertaining and crazy and you embrace it because you get engagement and interest and also there's information available, right? Like things are happening, people are talking, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, uh, I've had my share of dysfunction, more than my share of dysfunction. Let's get on a roll, let's start winning and let's write books and let's grow Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard through the roof on YouTube. Joey says the great job, thank you. George says, thanks, Pat, for your questions. The question is after 4 years, what makes him think he can do the right decision since he has no record here of doing so? Right. Yeah, there was actually a moment where he said, there were two things he said that really stuck out to me about how kind of tone deaf the whole idea is that he deserves more time. So he said, so at one point early on, he said, I am tasked with trying to get this organization going back in the proper direction. And at another point, he said, I think we have a good young core to build around here. But those are acceptable comments for a first year general manager. Like I'm tasked with turning this around. Only acceptable comments for a first GM. Good young core to build around. That's what you say about the team you inherit that stinks but has a few good players and you're trying to build from there. That's not what you say in year 4 of the team you have built. Like he really walked into it when he said that the defense was ranked 30th. And then he acknowledged, oh, wow, I added all these players and we're still ranked 30th. And you look at last night's starting lineup, 10 of the 11 players are people added by Joe Schoen either through free agency or the draft. And the one who isn't is the best player when he's playing his best, Dexter Lawrence, who he did not pick. Let's see. Brandon says, really appreciate you pressing him. Did you get the feel he already knew he was fired? I think he knows it's possible, but not definite. Was he getting emotional during the presser? You had his voice trembling. He was getting emotional, I think, during my answers when I pressed him with those 3 questions. And then later, when Jordan asked him about the idea of a coach possibly wanting to bring his own GM in, there was definitely some significant emotion in his voice. Also, might have been I don't know how many times Shane has done a standing presser. He doesn't do it often. Standing at the podium. TK says, never would have guessed you didn't grow up a Giants fan. You're as knowledgeable as anyone on their history. And TK, thank you for saying that. But genuinely, like that is, I hope that's evidence to everybody that I'm serious when I say, you know, being a journalist, like you take it seriously and trying to develop that objectivity has been a 30-year work to the point where then it makes you see things through that lens. And that's what you become. Omar says, hey, Pat, if Shane is fired, and I know it's early, who would be early candidates for that job? Thanks again. I've said before I would give Will McClay a call from Dallas immediately. I I love what he's done in Dallas. I doubt the Cowboys would let him out. Um, but then you got to look at really the other best operations of the around the league and look at their deputies and pick their brains. But we'll get more into that as we get deeper into December. Let's see. Pat, would it have been over the line to ask Joe if he's going to answer the question after he's saying he understands the question? Depends if he had just said I understand the question and stopped there, then that would not be over the line. Pat, do you believe Shane will be back? Please answer. Dean, my understanding is they're going to reevaluate it at the end of the season. And if you want Shane gone, promising answer of his was reiterating what I just told you, is he said that ownership intends to evaluate the entire football operation at the end of the year, which means that he's on shaky ground and not definitely on solid ground. Is HBO back in the building for the mid-season Hard Knocks? Yes, they are. They have been. The first episode drops tonight. I think it's 9 o'clock HBO. Bratz says Carter had the balls to ask to wear 56. Can you imagine if they had given him 56 or 11 and this stuff was happening? Paul believes Shane will be gone at the end of the season. Aziki says, do you believe that the problems with this team would be fixed by a new GM and coach? I think the issues with this team run deeper than that. This team is always looking the same through different regimes. Ownership is definitely an issue as well and has been as far as involvement in these decisions for sure. Um, but like I said, right now to me, not the time to go after John Mara, not a normal circumstance. Right now, we just want him to get healthy. But for the overall health of the organization going forward, and I hate going forward. I've never said that. That's like the first time I've ever said going forward. I can't believe I said that. Such a useless saying. That's the writer in me. Such a useless phrase means nothing. But I guess Ezekiel, I'm not discounting that the ownership issue is something that needs to be addressed, but saying that yes, that is something that has to evolve to a more efficient place for sure. Do I think Shane is a good guy? I'm not gonna sit here and make it personal about whether someone's a good or a bad person or anything like that. Not gonna judge personally, but if you're asking me about how do I like how he does his job, how he operates behind the scenes, how he has treated, talked to players, agents, people around the league, what his reputation is in that regard, no, I don't love it. Pat, your guess is as good as mine if this Joker is going to retain his job, but Gettleman followed by Shane is just too much to bear. No doubt, D-Kit. No doubt. Crazy. That's the best point if we're gonna bring up Gettleman in any way other than just saying he's ridiculously was a ridiculously all-time bad GM, it's to bring him up to say that that is an overwhelming back-to-back, and the idea that Shane belongs in the same sentence as him in any way is reflective of the fact that it's almost a part of the same disaster, right? Which goes to the previous point of it going above their heads and their inability to hire the right people. Jimbo says, "I was gonna joke about the book. Hope for all our sakes you can get your bread." Appreciate you. Dable always said it was not good enough after a loss. Shane opened by saying 2-11 is not good enough. Did Shane seem to understand how ridiculous that answer sounds? I know. He's probably just grateful to have a job after that ass kicking in New England last night. We all knew letting McKinney walk was a huge mistake at the time, one this team hasn't recovered from. Packers GM did his job. Big Dash says, great job today, Pat. Thank you. Big Dash, sorry. First of all, Southern, thank you. Big Dash says, great job today, Pat. Thank you, Big Dash. How the hell did he not get fired today? Great question, Brats. Love the question about letting leadership players walk out the door. Do you and other beat reporters ever whack a bar when you're together on the road? You mean go out for a couple beers or go out and have dinner? Yeah, for sure. Pat, do you get frustrated by not getting real answers? In my opinion, the Giants are distracted by the PR firm that prepares them for these press conferences. Internal PR firm, I guess you mean. Yeah, I mean, it depends. if it's disrespectful or it's habitual ignorance and um, combative, it can get that way. But my job's to ask the question. Their job is to answer it however they want. So try not to be frustrated. You do at times, though. You're human. If Shane is back, it will be the same result, says OG. Agree. Ray says giant book synopsis. Our story is the story of guys who started at the bottom and with a lot of bad work continue along the bottom and finally end up at the bottom. A real rags to rags story. Jackson says, who is the most interesting person on the team? That's a good question. Most interesting person on the team? Andrew Thomas is an interesting dude. You know, plays the plays the piano, highly intelligent, disciplined, physical specimen, excellent player. Trying to think. I mean, Kayvon, definitely a unique dude. Jameis, unique guy. That's a good question. I'm gonna think more about that one. Thomas Dimitrov for GM. Does have the experience. Um, Bad on-field results aside of the Giants, an enjoyable organization to work with. Um, Up and down. A lot of times these organizations go with the way the results go as far as how people operate and how they're feeling and how they're, conducting themselves or whether they're uplifted or down. And so a lot of losing just makes everything harder on everybody. The on-field results trickle through everything, basically. It's like if any of you went to a big college football school, like I went to Notre Dame, it's like the entire week is dictated as far as how it feels around interacting with a lot of people. Your entire week can feel like dictated by the result as far as the vibes. Um, Ryan Cowden, he's a good friend of Joe Shane's, even though he left. Is it me or is Shane always calling on you for questions? No, I think today he just welcomed. He knew that I would be ready, and he welcomed the smoke. Yeah. Guys, awesome chat tonight. Awesome chat. Thank you all for being here. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you especially to all of the super chatters, our top fans according to YouTube. For the chat, Joey B, number one, Richard Armstrong, Kyle Gata, Dan, No Mets, Jimbo, TL, Leo, Hunter, Tyree, Laner, Bo, Christopher, Ray, Jacob, Barb, Hooks, Romans, and on and on and on. Really grateful to all of you, and thank you to everybody who joined. I'll answer this one last question. This looks interesting. Pat, can you explain what the procedure is? So oftentimes it seems reporters get to ask questions, but I don't know if the write articles based on those questions or based on but I don't know if they write articles based on those questions or based on the information. Basically, everybody has different jobs, and so I might be asking a certain question to do a podcast on it, but not be using all the direct quotes in a story. Someone else might be writing about, like today, you might have had somebody more interested in the coaching search and what that's going to look like and Shane's role. And then there might be somebody more interested in his role in Dable's firing and his accountability and why he's even still here in the first place. So, you know, everybody has different jobs. And so that can end up being the difference in who's asking what and why. Richard says, thanks, Pat. Great job today and tonight. D Kid says, only because I'm in Canada on business, can't do a super chat for some reason. No problem, D Kid. You're a day oneer as well. Thank you so much for all your support as always. OMG closes us out and says, thank you for your service. Matthew says, who would you bet on to win a Super Bowl first off right now, the Giants or the Jets? I'll take the field. Guys, reminder, Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard. We are live after every Giants game at the stadium, home or away. The only game I will not be at is the Vegas game right after Christmas. And other than that, though, the three of their last four, I will be at the games. And then for the Vegas game, I will. I should end up, I think, doing a live chat after that one as well. But Talking Ball post game live with Pat Leonard, and then Talking Ball live like this, we go live during the weeks. We usually go live later at night, like 9 or 9:30, something like that. We try to do Mondays and Thursday nights. I've been inconsistent uh, this season um, on keeping it 3 days a week. But stay tuned. I'm always advertising it on social media. You can follow me on X at P Leonard NYDN or on all my other socials, TikTok, YouTube, um, so we got TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Threads. PL on NFL is the handle. Please subscribe if you haven't already to the channel here. Please hit the thumbs up, the like button before you leave, and support our sponsors as well. As I said at the top, my bookie, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, Hooks Rubs and Spices, and Sal Loretta for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey. Hooksrub.com. The code is Talkin Ball. Boomchaga.com. The code is Talkin Ball 25. Boom, my bookie, where you can tail all of Pat's picks. The code is Leonard, Leonard. And Saloretta for Men. Go there, Bergen County, New Jersey, Midland Park, to be specific, and tell them that Pat Leonard sent you. Thank you all for all the support. You can read my column in the New York Daily News on the New York Daily News website, nydailynews.com. My column, my take in writing form on Joe Schoen, what he said, what his argument was, what I think about it, and where this stands and where it is headed. Jacob says you should go live for the Raiders game as play-by-play if you're not there. I'll consider that. Not a bad idea. And Met says, thanks, Pat. Let's right this ship for all of us with accountability. Jackson says, let's go Giants. Simeon says, thanks, Pat. Good night. Thank you all from East Rutherford, Quest Diagnostics Training Center. Pat Leonard from the New York Daily News and the Talking Ball with Pat Leonard podcast. Signing off. Go to the Shopify page. Go get some Talking Ball merch and take care.